Going live in 3, 2, 1, and you're live.
Welcome, everybody, to week 4 of the Segal talks here from New York City at the Graduate Center CUNY at the City University of New York. It's a little bit colder day, and we are in the first weeks of the programming. Actually, I think we are the only institution in New York City, perhaps in the US, creating daily new programs and not showing what is already out there. And we always felt it is important to listen to artists, to theater artists, to hear their voices, and to actually also listen carefully. And we had right now participants from Egypt, Lebanon, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Belgium, Italy, so many countries. And this Monday we have truly a special guest with us. It's the great Milo Rau from Switzerland, who is based in Belgium at Ghent at the moment. For many people, he represents the very best, the very innovative, the most thought-provoking approach to a contemporary new theater, like what we have in our little press release. We write new forms are needed for the new times we live in. That's what Brecht said, and Milo already had done that. He has been a frequent guest at the Segal Center's film festivals. We tried once or twice to get him over here. It didn't work out because he's a really hard worker. He's really dedicating his work and life to it. He has done great shows like the Zurich strikes, the Congo Tribunal, the Moscow trials. He has done a play about Ceausescu, 5 easy pieces, and they all create a new work where the documentary theater, classic theater that in a Brechtian sense provokes thinking ultimately to take action, takes hold. And he really is a brilliant young director. He just also did in Mosul in Iraq. He did Orestaya, the wonderful actress Suzu Abdul-Majid, who I also know, worked with him. She was the Cassandra, and she told me a lot about the work he did there. And I know it's in the film now. He is cutting at the moment a film about the life of Jesus and so many other things. These times which we have now here, Milo, first of all, welcome, is about, to make meaning out about it and to think. We are bombarded with voices from politicians, virologists, economic advisors, but we really need to hear also from the artists. Artists traditionally have been on the right side of history, on the right side of social progress, on the right side of what is the truth. And we would love to know and hear from you. You are sitting, I assume, in Ghent, or you're in Germany or in Switzerland. Where are you at the moment?
I'm in Cologne, in Germany. It's not far from Ghent, for 2 hours from. It's in the very west from Germany, at the border to Belgium. Yeah,
thank you.
Family. I'm living there.
What time is it now in Cologne?
It's 6:05
p.m.
hours later. Yeah.
So you live with who's your family? You live with.
So my girlfriend, my girlfriend, she's also the graphic designer of all my projects, and then I have two daughters. So the four of us are now in this apartment here, and since 3 weeks. How long is the quarantine now in the confinement in New York? How long are you at home now?
Yeah, I think it's like over 4 or 5 weeks now,
yes,
and it was very loose, as you know. Trump says, he's not wearing a mask, but people should wear a mask. So, but it's a very serious situation. New York and the state of New York has more dead than most states or any state in the world,
true.
And so we are really stunned by all of it. And of course, if you look at numbers, and we talked about it earlier, we had Aristide from Burkina Faso on the program. He said 400,000 people die of malaria every year in Africa. The world doesn't stop. That we don't even have money to have measles vaccinations. In India, Rupa Roy told us about it. 500,000 people were trying to leave New Delhi on foot because all the service people, the disenfranchised, who no longer allowed in the homes of the people they served so faithfully, and they were trying to walk home. Some of them up to 1,000 kilometers. It was a biblical things are happening. So it puts us also in perspective. We don't hear these stories, also not in the New York Times. as much, especially not from India. And so how is it in Ghent, in Belgium? Are you connected to the theater scene there? What do you hear from Belgium?
Yeah, I think it's more or less the same like in Germany. I mean, here it's a bit, let's say, a little bit better organized, a little less aggressive than in Belgium, because the Belgian state is, as you know, a bit dysfunctional, I have to confess. And in a good and in a bad way sometimes, but of course they are very disciplined too. So now we are over the peak, I guess. So it's slowly going down again, and the discussion is open now to weaken the confinement. To, for example, in 1 week, my younger daughter will go to school again. I don't know how it is in New York, in the US, but
unthinkable at the moment. Yeah,
unthinkable.
Yeah.
So here slowly it's taking back. Of course, you have like kind of experts from both sides saying when we go back now, like on 1919 with the Spanish flu, it will come back then even stronger. So you don't know. And yeah, I think you mentioned the malaria case, and for example, in Africa, where you have dying people, thousands and thousands all the time without any measures, without any media coverage. And of course, in Corona, one positive thing you could say that it started in the rich centers of the globalized world. So immediately there was an answer, of course, to it. So that's on the one hand a good thing. On the other hand, of course, now it's also spreading to the whole rest of the world. You mentioned India, where it started a bit later. I was just like 3.5 weeks ago, I was still in the north of Brazil to stage the Antigone, and they are also a bit, I think, comparable to the US. There is not a real clear strategy from the government of Jair Bolsonaro. So he's also more or less blocking his institutions, giving very chaotic advice to the media and to the officials. He just dismissed his health minister 4 days ago. So I mean, in every country you feel it depends strongly from the reaction of the government. On the other hand, from how is the civil society organized? How do they take it?
And your rehearsals were interrupted in Brazil. You couldn't finish your project, right? The Antigone project was interrupted.
No, it was at one moment we decided. I mean, it was a bit strange. It was quite interesting to see it, because when I arrived in Brazil, it was 1 week to the lockdown in Europe. And when they locked down, so they closed my theater when I was absent in Brazil, and I had to take all these decisions from very far. But it was quite strange, I didn't take it personal. So it was kind of, okay, this is happening in Europe, but in north of Brazil, nothing arrives, also not Corona at all. And it was also a bit, I'm working together with the landless movement there, and they are activists. And of course you have a big optimism of the will in a social movement. And you think if you go on, it will not happen. So you have this on the bad and on the good side. And then after some days, we decided that it was too dangerous, because activists from all the country prepared themselves to come up to the north to participate in the project. And then we stopped it, and we postponed it to November. And I went in quarantine to the south, to Sao Paulo, waited there for some time until we got a flight, and then we went back to Amsterdam, so to Europe.
Milo, you created a Ghent Manifesto when you took over the theater in Ghent, and I think if I'm right, paragraph number 1 is it's no longer about portraying the world, it's about changing it. How does Corona, is that come in for you? That is that also changing your thought about, or is it confirming what you already thought?
Yeah, both things. I can feel it myself, and I can of course see it in Europe. It's a very mixed situation. On the one side, the globalization is stopped, because for example, you have in Europe, even the European Union is kind of postponed for later. The national states are going back, the borders are closed, and you can see in the outside borders of Europe, you can feel how even almost a bit fascist, this new state of emergency is that they blocked the refugee camps. People are blocked in Greece, in South Italy. They can't go out anymore. Everything is blocked, and every nation, if you want, they are taking care of themselves. So kind of you could say that the global solidarity is stopped for some time. On the other hand, you have, and this is a kind of a very, you could say, anarchistic joy, I even feel a bit, that the whole big mega machine, the capitalistic mega machine, is stopped from one moment to the other, that big industries, for example, Mercedes, Adidas, etc., are kind of halfly nationalized, Volkswagen even. So they got a lot of financial support. And now for me, the big question is, what is the next step? How do we democratize? How do we actually politicize this situation? What is the things we are asking to these big industries? What is Volkswagen producing after Corona? How are we going on with this experience we have now? Because for me, it's kind of, you could say, a general rehearsal to the climate crisis. So how can we stop the machine? How can we act together? So we can learn, I think, a lot out of this, but we can also, and I feel it even in my own theater, I feel it in the whole artistic field, that everybody is planning kind of from the moment on when we will take again from September, October, November, or December, or even January, but just to restart with what we did before. And I think now we should really take a time, take this gap to think, how can we make differently theater? For example, you were talking about the form of doing theater. So I have the biggest house we have in Ghent. It's a 19th century hall, 700 people in it. And this will only open in perhaps January, that you can play there again. So we are waiting, thinking into the architecture of the 19th century, you know? And perhaps we should go to other places. We should go to the virtual space, or to just outside in the street, to smaller spaces. We should have another way of thinking theater after this crisis. And there's a lot of new forms being developed at that very moment. As I said, for example, people is restarting doing theater in small spaces in Europe. There is, of course, all the tryouts in the virtual space, which are starting to connect. There are rehearsals online. You have a lot of, and I think for me, it's one of the most positive effects, that we found out how many discussions we can have without taking a flight, for example. So we can discuss, we never discussed before, because we said, okay, if we don't have the opportunity that I fly to New York or you fly here, we will not do it. Now we do it because we have to do it. And we get used to it. So it's for me, we take quite fast many big steps. On the other hand, making theater, so I'm working now mostly on my films in that moment, in the last 3 weeks. Making theater, that's it's a genre medium of presence. And I learned how true this is. When I want to do an Antigone with the landless movement with indigenous people in Brazil, I have to be there with these people. Of course, I'm exchanging with Kaisara, my Antigone in the play, the indigenous activist who plays Antigone. We are exchanging by Skype and Zoom, and we are writing a speech together, or the play. But it's not that we can really rehearse, because it's not working dialectically. It's really like I don't really like it. But at the same time, a lot of decisions we have to take in NTGent, for example. We can take it now, what took like 4 hours before, we can do in 15 minutes in a video call. So we are kind of smoother than before. So this is on the positive side. Just when we are talking about the functioning of the institution. But I really think that we should now take this gap, this stop, to rethink what we do on stage, on which stage, with whom, and in what time frames.
What do you think in general should change in theater? Not just in your, because you already do so different, but what do you feel, what hasn't been working in general, or maybe just share your thoughts why it should be different?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I was reading a lot in the last weeks. I was preparing the Antigone and I was writing a text about Oedipus, King Oedipus. So I was like, like diving into the tragic mind. And I was asking myself, why do we still play these plays today? There are only 32 tragedies that came from Greek times to us. So why are we continuing to play this? And I think because these are really tragic play that show an antagonism that we can't solve, that there is a problem that is not just dramatic, but somehow insolvable. There is a tragic problem. And I think we are at that very moment confronted with a situation that is tragic, that we have to rethink the system we are living in. It's not just that we can make it a bit smoother and we can put a bit of green energy or whatever and it will go on. No, we have to stop that machine once forever or we will be fucked. And we deserve it. And I think this, to understand, really understand this, and to give a sensitivity to it, to give stories to it, to give forms to it, that we start to live in this kind of tragic moment as a culture, as a civilization, like the Greeks did in the 5th century before Christ, when they decided to develop this art form we still use because they were confronted to huge changes in their civilization. So really a time change. And I think we should come back to this and we should find forms to translate what the experts and what the scientists tell us since 50, 60, 100 years. We know what will happen in 10 or 15 or 20 years. We know everything about the climate collapse. We know what happens to India, to Europe, to US, to Africa, etc. in not a lot of time during our generation. But we can't feel it because we can't tell it and we don't have any way of, let's say, knowledge to connect what we know and what we can do as a society. So we have to reconnect on it, and I think theater plays a role in giving a symbolic space to this learning action and trying out possible actions. You introduced me with mentioning the trials, for example. I did the Congo Tribunal. This is a tribunal we did because we saw we have a transnational economy, we have a globalized economy, but we have not a globalized economic law. So if you are pushed out of your land, let's say as a Congolese citizen from a Canadian or a US or a Swiss enterprise, there's no tribunal you can appeal to. So we created it. We created the theater tribunal, but the real one, with real advocates, with real witnesses, with real cases, and it somehow became real. And I think, you quoted in the beginning Bertolt Brecht, who said, theater is a stage where you learn to act politically. You represent, of course, you have to represent, you have to let know, perhaps you have to declare stuff sometimes, or you just have, I mean, I like theater also as an emotional machine. I'm much more Stanislavski than Brecht ever was. I mean, to be true, Brecht, he used the techniques of Stanislavski too. He just didn't label them. But on the other hand, of course, I think that theater is a utopic tool, much more, for example, than movies can be, because movies you have always disconnected. You have never a public connected to a very live moment where you have to decide, for example, on the one or the other side, or you have really a presence of somebody, etc., etc. And you also see that at that very moment of disconnection, it's theater that is disconnected the most. So we are losing, I think, a theater makes much more. What I'm doing now, I'm writing, I'm editing films, I'm talking through the camera, so I can continue with almost everything, but not the social life. I can't go demonstrating and I can't go making theater. So actually the political sphere is blocked. And that means that theater as a political tool is blocked too.
You said it's about stopping the machine.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we somehow didn't stop you couldn't say we didn't stop the machine ourselves as a civic society, because we are just following the measures of our governments and we are very disciplined doing it. And before this happened, there was, of course, the idea of having a kind of a green dictatorship and you would have like rules that you have to follow. So you can't use your car on Wednesdays and on Saturdays, or I don't know. And I think what we have to do now is, of course, to translate, because that's how we are functioning. I think we should now stop with the neoliberal idea that everything should be free to do or not to do, and that we are only individuals and we can't act together. We learned now that we can act together, but it has to be somehow, there have to be kind of rules that we now decide all together. I think now it's really the moment of take the next step, and like, as I said, politicizing or democratizing this state of emergency we are living in. We have to decide now, okay, we learned this. What are we doing now? How is, for example, the parliament controlling the economy? Which is it doing now 100%? How are we doing it in the future? How we are organizing all this stuff in the future? And then we can decide on this. And I think here I'm extremely positive after this experience of Corona, that even a state like Brazil, where just the solidarity of the civil society saves the country. You have strong institutions and they save the people. So you have you see, we are really prepared, not only in the West, also also in the whole rest of the world. We are quite well prepared to take these steps to avoid the climate collapse. So I think this is a very good, as I said, a very good general rehearsal to show that we can go down with the machine. But now, when we start again, we should do it following the things we learned, or we have to learn now, and we should continue on the how to call it, on this kind of halfly nationalized way of dealing, for example, with the economy.
That is incredible. So using this theater as a symbolic space, as a model for something. Let's say the Brazilian the work of the Antigone, you show a possible world, and if it's possible on stage, it might be possible in life. People will think that. That's why some governments don't like theater. The Tia Varsova, who is creating new political work, says, you know, this is why what we like to do. This is why we do theater. And we had also Abhishek, who said, you know, they asked him, how is your theater effective in India? He said, I don't know. Ask the government. They're forbidding it. It means something is happening. There are films 20 million people see or more, or one TV series, you know, and but my small plays get forbidden. Yours also have been have a hard time in some places. They were censored. Do you feel your theater is a very open political activist theater?
I'm doing plays or actions that are extremely directly political, like these tribunals or trials. Or, for example, we were talking shortly about the Jesus film in preparation of this talk, yeah. The new gospel. A film I made in South Italy, in Matera, where Pasolini, Pier Paolo Pasolini, a director I like a lot, did a Jesus film in the 60s, and then Mel Gibson did a quite trashy version of the last part of the Passion of the Christ, called The Passion of the Christ, in the, I think, 2004. And I brought the actors from Pasolini and the Mel Gibson together in last autumn to make a new Jesus film. But when I came there, I saw it just would have been an aesthetic action to do it, because Matera, the capital of culture in Europe in 2019, is surrounded by refugee camps, illegalized people, 500,000 people. And the whole Italian agriculture is working because these people are cheap workers, and they are under the control of mafia. They are doing the whole tomato and orange, etc., work. So without these 500 people, without the illegalized people there, it wouldn't work. And then I said, okay, what would Jesus do? Who would Jesus be today? And I found a Cameroon activist, Ivan Sagné, who was working on the plantation 10 years ago, doing the first strike against the mafia. And I asked him if he wants to play my Jesus. and then asked him, but how did you do your strike? How was it possible? Because of course, there's the strategy of dividing people by identity politics. So a Cameroon people, somebody from Cameroon wouldn't work with somebody from Congo, wouldn't work with somebody from Romania. And of course, the mafia is dealing with this divided impera. And he told me, I made it like this. I had 12 sub-leaders from the 12 different countries people were coming from. And I said, ah, wow, 12 sub-leaders. This remembers really Jesus. So search your 12 sub-leaders and your 12 apostles. And we found 12 activists from 12 different societies living there in the refugees camps or outside, sex workers, etc. And we united them. And then we made, together with the actors from Mel Gibson and the actors still alive from Pasolini, for example, his Jesus became our John the Baptist. We made this film again, and there's one part. So we will edit it now. We are more or less finished, and we will finish in the film the next weeks. But at the same time, we founded what we call the Houses of Dignity, Casa della Dignità. So we occupied houses, because you have this absurd contradiction in the refugee law in Europe that if you don't have a place where you live, you don't have the possibility to work and to get papers. And if you don't have get papers, you can't have a house, you know? So you are in between all the time. So we occupied and we pushed the state and the Catholic Church to accept these houses. And that's how these people became legal. And that was one outcome, or is still one outcome of this project we did. So there was a film, a Jesus film, at the same time a political action. And I would say it's very difficult to say what is it now, because when you watch the film, you would see parts of the revolt, parts of this political action, but you would also see a Jesus film. So I think as an artist, you are always with one foot in an aesthetical world, we call it symbolical world, metaphorical world, that you do as if. And on the other hand, what you do as if has an impact in the real world, that it becomes real. Of course, you have to push it. Huh? But when the first parliament was created in Europe, in France, in the 18th to the end of the 18th century, the king was saying, but guys, you just invented that you are the parliament. You are not, you are just people from the provinces. And they said, no, we are the parliament. We are the nation now. We are now the legal power. And he had just to accept it. And in the end, he even lost his head. So this is another story. But every time when humans are working, and I studied at sociology at Bourdieu, every social action is in the beginning, a theatrical action, of course. So there is what seems to us just the reality, the social reality, is the normalization of acts of creation that other generations, or perhaps even ourselves, did at the moment. So art becomes quite simply real. For me, it was like every time I do projects, or I look to other projects, to books, to films, it's not only theater, of course, I'm impressed how small this step is from what you could call a creation, an invention, to something that seems real to everybody. I remember even in the soft power side, in the politics of images, when we did the Jesus film and we had this black Jesus, at one moment we had a discussion in one village. We had a lot of discussions with the public, etc. And an activist was asked by the public, but what is the outcome of this? Because it's just a film. And he said, you know, that's the first black Jesus we have in Europe in the film history. And when the next comes, it will just be normal that there is like a black president. It will be the next one. And then some days later, I had a discussion with my children, because we have the first female chancellor, Angela Merkel in Germany. And I was telling them, listen, they will vote for a new chancellor in a year. And perhaps it's this guy, and it was a male. And my daughter said, I didn't know that the man can also become chancellor. I thought only women can become chancellor, because Angela Merkel is the only one she knows, you know. And there
for a long time, yeah.
Yeah, for a long time. And there you can see how I don't know, how simple you can like kind of create kind of a normality of whatever in the good and in the bad sense, you know. So in the bad sense, of course, we have a lot of examples here in Europe and all over the world, what you say, what is normal and what isn't, you know. So I think broaden this idea of normality, which is quite simple actually in the arts, is one of the main projects. So it's and then of course the question is, when you start to, it's an act to do it, but when you start to make an institution out of it, of a parliament, for example, then the question is, but who can be in the parliament? Who invented the parliament? And of course, France, the parliament in France stayed for a very long time the parliament of rich white men. So I think, you know, so you have to think as a permanent revolution. You have to reinstall, reinvent all the time what you did, because the biggest revolutionaries, of course, the day after the revolution, they became the most conservatory people in the world. So right. This is the problem we are in. Also, when you create new forms of theater. So when, for example, we tried to create new forms, or 10 years ago, somebody you should invite is the group Rimini Protocol from Europe.
Yeah, next week they are.
Next week they are. Yes. So for me, this is a very good example, because they are like kind of 10 years older than I am. They created in Europe, it was not new, but they really somehow installed it as a form that not actors on stage, but people like you and me, called experts, telling about our daily life experience. So when they would make a play about Marx, so they would perhaps invite somebody who was leftist at a certain time, or so, etc. You know, or when they talk about death, they would invite somebody who is close to dying, etc. So this was at that moment, it was new, because it was very not metaphysical. They didn't invite children because they are very authentic, because they wanted to know what children know. So this very sociological approach to make theater was around 2000, very new in Europe. And then you could wait like 3 or 4 years, and it became in the big city theaters like the way to do it. So in every shitty Shakespeare mise en scène, you would have like 2 or 3 real people making it authentic and telling about whatever they lived in their lives, you know. So it became very fast, how to say, a classical tool of bourgeois theater. So it goes very fast. So you have to stay smooth, and also accept that you have to leave behind stuff, and that you have to rethink your forms you are using. For example, I'm a lot of times criticized by what we are doing, because it's megalomaniac, because it's kind of neocolonialistic, because it's etc., etc. Because international solidarity, when you go to the Amazon and you work there and doing an Antigone, of course you can ask, but why Antigone? Why Antigone? Why bring a European play from 2000 years ago, written by a white man like Sophocles? Why bring it to the Amazon? Isn't this kind of neocolonialism? And then you have to think it, and you have to discuss it, and you have to develop it with the people you are working there. And we were chanceful, because they said we had to kind of explain the Antigone for 5 minutes, and they said, of course we understand Bolsonaro, that's Creon, Antigone, that's a traditional society that is being erased by the agro business, etc. So they understood immediately what it is about. But then they started immediately also to rewrite the texts. For example, in a Greek tragedy, everybody suicides in the end. And they said, sorry, but in a social movement like the landless movement, you would never suicide. So we don't accept to suicide in the end. And then you have to think, okay. And then it really becomes an Antigone in the Amazon, you know? So how you dive in, how you can adapt, and how can you really take the context as I mean, you quoted the first point of the Ghent Manifesto, saying that realism doesn't mean that you depict something real, but that the depicted, or the act of depiction, creates new reality. And of course, the best is if it's even political change, if you can kind of engage in a situation that is unjust, and it changes through the process of creating a play. So this is, of course, it's very beautiful.
Yeah, this is incredible. You know, theater is the space of the real, the imagined, the symbolic, and also of representation, and that actually it is powerful and important. It made me think of that famous sentence, what you said of the revolution will be televised. In a way, you say now the revolution will be performed. You know, people will perform acts of revolution, whether it's in theater or outside in activism, that the lines blur, and that symbolic meaning that the Rimini brought the everyday people into the theater, you know, that perhaps, I mean, this means everyday people are part of politics, you know, everyday people are part of the machine, all this. And so it means it's a changing that you keep it in mind. Like you said, yeah, well, I had to rethink Antigone. I couldn't just do it because, you know, people have, I have studied sociology. I know Bourdieu and Todorov. We have to think and adapt. And I know you often have like only 20% of the classic text left, and you rework it. Interesting, Anurupa Roy from India on the call said, you know, she's thinking about redoing the Mahabharata, which is now used by state television. Yeah. It's almost, you know, a right-wing tool. And yet we reform it, we change things. And so there's other ways of looking at it, and people are stunned. They can't imagine. She said they performed in front of 400 right-wing military people. And then their car was blocked when they got out, and they were afraid for their lives almost. And they said, no, can you come out and tell, is that really true, what you told us? You know, she said, so he said, I'm going to do that. It's a place about uncertainty, where it's not clear how it comes out. Yeah. And that. So, that is interesting. So is anything changing? I mean, you are 3 weeks at your home. Do you feel something inside you is changing, or you're in contact with something that you normally are not, or is it good or bad? But do you feel this is changing you?
Yeah, I mean, what is changing in me, you know, I'm not really a claustrophobic guy. I always liked sitting at home and writing, but I couldn't do it because I had to make theater. So now I can't, and I feel like falling back in my students' times when I was 20, 21, making projects, not knowing if they will happen, making project A, B, C, D, discussing with people by phone, and then planning and have plans, etc. And I like this open space, I have to say, where I'm not kind of very pragmatically involved all the time. So I don't feel a horror vacui, I have to say. I'm very happy to, for example, read the tragedies again, read a book about Simon Critchley, the Tragedy Greeks and Us, a very beautiful book. I read in the last days. I read some writings from Marx even again. I didn't read since 25 years. And I have a lot of discussions with almost everybody. We are working on a book now called Why Theater? And we are asking 100 people all over the world to contribute to this book, to ask ourselves, but what will happen? Social activists, like people that makes very classical theater, like Peter Brook, you know, like very, very classical, but people you wouldn't like kind of expect in a book with this title. So we're really asking ourselves, how can we renew the tradition of theater after Corona somehow? How can there be a theater that announces the post-capitalist times, and not in a broad leftist way of thinking that that is only economical, but on a lot of levels. And that's why we are asking, as you do in your discussions, people from the Amazonia, people from India, a lot of people from Africa, because there is so many knowledge, especially for theater, for me, that is not coming from Europe or from the tradition from Europe, and especially not from the very moment of now. For example, I'm very happy that the international system of exchanging the same 10 names is now for a moment stopped. Yeah. That you don't have these international festivals. I like them a lot, but where is invited just the same people. And now when it stopped, you're kind of waking up out of a dream and asking yourself, but why didn't we consider to really think on what we do next season or in the next edition of our festival? Why did we only try to invite the 10 big names and then the 10 local big names? And then why didn't we really think, what can we change by doing a festival, by doing a season. And now when we are talking about this White Theatre book, or about, of course, the next season in my theatre in NTGent and in my company, the IRPM, what are we doing next? We feel a need to do something because we go through all these possible plans to make the choice of a plan that really is worth executing it. Because perhaps we can only execute one plan next season. So we should take a plan that is a good plan. Or for example, when we do Antigone, I want to do it in the good way in Amazonia, and this is for me a very beautiful moment, because I was kind of like, I think everybody, you know, in the capitalism you have no work or you have too much work, but I think in between is not. In neoliberal times, you are completely useless, or you have to work like crazy. And I felt a bit back now in the kind of a healthy middle line where we have, for example, a lot of talks. People is asking, do you do a talk, a live stream here, a live stream there? And I'm not kind of meeting the people again that I met anyway, like 4 weeks again, and then doing a live stream. But I try to meet the people I wouldn't meet. Like, we really tried several times, but we never did it. So now we have the chance, and this is great.
So how does your day look like? Can you walk us through, like, if you what do you get up? What do you do? How do you structure your day in Cologne? How do we imagine that?
So I like to wake up quite early. And I'm writing in the very morning. So until from 7:30 until noon, and in the afternoon I'm hanging around with my daughters. We do a bit of schoolwork, but not too much. And I have some phone calls. I read. We go for walking. It's very possible here. So you can go in the park, for example, if you have some distance. And of course, I'm trying to organize also a bit in the afternoon. But I always did it like this: that the mornings are always used for writing or rehearsing, and the afternoons are used for the real life and the organization of the real life. Because when you wake up, you are very fresh. I have to say, for me to switch from traveling a lot, producing a lot, to sitting at home, it was extremely natural. Of course, sometimes it's a bit claustrophobic, then I go out or whatever, but it's possible. The only thing, you know, we have a big crisis at the moment, and I'm doing a lot in petition and political work at the European borders, because we have all this, I guess, perhaps the same in the south border of the States. We have a lot of people blocked there, a lot of young people, children even, and this is a big crisis, and it's completely impossible to send somebody there or to go there. You can't go. It's not possible at the moment. So you are really a bit kind of limited to a very to write texts, to make calls, to make petitions, but you can't really. Political work is very blocked, and that's on the higher institutional level. Of course, this is the big problem, because we have a lot of things that in Europe change at the very moment, like in every crisis, that you have the kind of political parties and the governments like pushing a lot of economic stuff in a bad way, like fast through, when nobody can kind of react because there's a state of emergency. So this is problematic. And then I'm sitting at home and reading a book about the Greeks and the tragedy. And of course, I know that this is not really helpful in this situation to do this all the reading stuff. So it's I think this time is now coming to an end. This time of waiting at home, it has to end. It was for some time, it was healthy, but now we have to take the decisions out of it. We have to act again.
Good. And to act means you make calls, you write letters from home, or you mean you look forward? Most probably it will open soon in a couple of weeks. I mean, in Germany it's different. There are plans to open schools, go out. So are you planning to go back to Ghent? Do you think there will be social distancing in theater, like every 5 seats is one person, one row empty, or what are the plans in Ghent for your theater?
I mean, we are officially announcing next season in end of May, and then we have a plan to go with small units, but this is really in planning, to the city and playing outside the theater. I think the theater can now, it's officially closed.
Like street theater, you're going to go to locations outside in the city of Ghent.
Yeah,
to do what?
Starting from August on. Yeah, we have a lot of project next season. Is called Against Integration. So we are really we have a whole season that is kind of exploring the possibilities to do theater outside the institution and outside kind of classical acting. So we have one project that is called Dissident, where we want to work with schools. And then we have another project in Amazonia, and etc. etc. So everything is happening not in the building, which will be closed until September anyway by law now. It's impossible. In September we will, as you say, start with some, not 600 people, but perhaps 200 or 100. And I just, like some days ago when we were talking about how we do the plan, when do we play the next time, I don't know, our big plays, I was just deciding, let's not wait for it. Let's plan a season that is as if you couldn't open. You have really to do another theater. Let's start think about this. And I think this is what we have to do, because as I said, the very strange thing is that we are adapting to an architecture that was made in the 19th century. We are adapting to halls that were made and constructed a long time ago, or in the 80s or in the 90s during neoliberal times. But this is an architecture that perhaps is not working anymore, or working in a different way. So why take it just as a disadvantage, and we have to wait until we can do it in the proper way? Then let's do it in another way.
That's a fantastic idea, and I think I haven't heard that approach. I think that makes a lot of sense. Annie B. Person, the choreographer in New York, said she was interested in the kind of 6-foot distance as a choreographer. You know, she says actually more or less it's a distance I often tell my dancers. You know, they come together, but if they stay close enough, and so how does it work on the street? People now see each other, move through it. So I would love to hear, if you say you do it outside, let's say on a square in Ghent, will there be a monologue, or people in a costume, or will people with a microphone, like a guitar player on the street? What will the project look like? Are you thinking of specific scenes to play, or is that still open?
I think that the important thing is perhaps more basic than this, because you can do a very bourgeois theater outside a theater space of the 19th century. As you said, I could just ask an actor to make a monologue. And then if he makes the monologue inside or outside, I think this is only very stupid people will think that this is then a very revolutionary theater if you do this. Because it's just a trick. And, I think we should kind of step out of the tricks, because we had these kind of tricks going in the streets that started, I don't know, in the 20s and then in the 60s and then again and again. But what are we doing outside? Are we occupying? What is the action we are doing? With whom are we working? Who is holding this monologue? This, for example, schoolboys in school. How are we developing with it? A university for what? You know, is it a university of resistance? Is it a university to create new ways of writing theater, of playing theater, of creating the institution of theater, that you really can take this moment to transform it? Because when we just now send out our specialists of doing theater in a square, and then the light guy makes the beautiful light, and myself, I would direct a bit, and then somebody by memory will tell a monologue of Shakespeare. I don't see any use in doing this. I like it. I always, as a child, I liked sitting outside and watching it. As you said, this distance and being kind of surrounded, not by walls, but by, it's beautiful. We should do it, but we should really also like rethink what is the act of doing theater. Because when the Greeks did theater, it was kind of directly linked to their political scene at all. You know, it was kind of really, I think you have Mr. Schechner tomorrow,
Yes.
And he can tell you a lot about the ritual of doing theater when the young man came back from the war, and then the big Dionysic festival was happening, and they were dramatically talking about what happened. If we can reopen this space of where the traumas of society, and there are a lot after this month that we are now at home, dying or not dying or whatever, comes out, and we have a festival like this, and we have a meeting, and we use theater again as a real meeting, not just taking a ticket with a beautiful dress, sitting down in the hall, watching from the black into the light, etc., etc. But we reinvent this meeting space as theater, especially after a time when meeting was impossible. I'm very happy, but I'm extremely afraid that the aestheticalization, I don't know if the aestheticization of like, for example, the movements you do in the street when you don't want to meet, and that we, you know, or this little mask in Mozart operas, we will see all this on stage, of course. We will have the aestheticization of everything. And if this happens, that we just introduce all this new knowledge in the old way of making, we do the same karaoke of the old canon we did before, but just with some new gadgets.
Yeah.
And in fact, then we learn anything.
Yeah.
You know?
And people make money off it or want to advance their careers. I mean, the Greek theater, of course, also the beauty was you would see the city of Athens in the back, you know, from this theater. The city was really the backdrop. Gods were in the temples. People believed they were, you know, in there watching, and you spoke to them actually, and not so much often to the audiences. So you would say on a square in Ghent, you create a school or people, so like you said, they're like writing a play with the people in the city. But what, I don't know if you could share some of the idea. I would be interested. What are you planning to do on those squares in Ghent?
You know, a bit by accident, we anyway made a decision even before this Corona crisis happened to have a season that is not a season like the last one. Because the first season, it's my third season as an artistic director, and the first season was a kind of revolutionary one. So we created what we called global ensemble with a lot of people, non-actors, actors, dancers, just people, even animals. So we really opened the idea of doing theater to all living somehow. The second season was kind of, we were like using the manifesto, the rules, the ensemble, and we made a very successful theater, like new classics, as we call it.
The altarpiece, yeah.
The altarpiece, for example. And in the third season, we decided to go not only on the streets in Ghent, because Ghent is just an example, it's just a city. Ghent is everywhere and everything is into Ghent. You would find a lot of Americans, a lot of people, even from Amazonia, in this city, like in every city. So going outside, for example, as I said, going to schools, for example, going to neighborhoods, going to Amazonia, going a bit everywhere and trying to exchange, this is the plan we have. But of course, this is the formalistic choices. For example, we have Luanda Casella, which is a director from Brazil, living in Ghent, or we have Lara Stahl, which is a curator from Amsterdam. And it depends from them how they decide to do it. For example, Luanda Casella likes a lot of kind of playful university. So she does a play that is called Killjoy Quiz. And she will work with people in that way. I think I would more work when I do then preparing my project. I'm more the assembly guy. So I like assemblies, I like political actions. One plan I have, I would really, as fast we can travel again, I would like to go to the refugee camps, open them, making in the borders of Europe, making their occupations, giving houses to the people, because the strange thing is in South Italy or in Greece, where you have the biggest camps, there you also have the most of the houses just empty. So you have a lot of space that is not used.
Lots of space.
And just because of the contradiction of the political system, because these people is not legal. So I would use the theater as a machine of legalization and taking home, for example. That would be a project. I would prefer to invest money in this than invest, as I said, in making a beautiful little gadgets to make a beautiful play in my big hall. So this is for me a bit at least the beginning of when we can restart to really reinvent the act It's not going about going into the streets. I can imagine that somebody, and for example, if we come back to Peter Brook, you can do in a very classical space. You can do something that is changing. You know, it's not about where you do it. It's perhaps even not about with whom you are doing it. For me, it's the context and the actors are extremely important. So all my aesthetics depend from where I do it and with whom. But you can have another approach. So I saw incredible plays that are absolutely not interested in what I'm taking as an entry step to use the real act of theater.
Yeah, that is fascinating, interesting that you you went to university, you studied, you also worked as a journalist. Remember, you were a journalist. In a way, you are prepared in a way for adapting, you know, new forms and to rethink things, and that perhaps this is an additional qualification that helps to find forms. Yeah.
One thing that is important, I think theater is a form of crisis. I think theater is not really existing in a just going on society. What we had now for a long time, and I was raised in it, was the idea of doing karaoke with some classics. And then on the little stages, you would try out. But take Shakespeare. Shakespeare, when he made his Hamlet, there were a lot of Hamlets. He just could have used one, you know? And he didn't do it because he said, no, I have my ensemble and I have my interest and I have my public and I want to do it now. And it's very strange that then we decided to his now, who was a very specific now, to kind of take it again and again and again and not adapt it to our now. And I think in moments of crisis, for a moment, the whole story that it will continue forever as it was and you can do forever the same, just a bit change from season to season, breaks. And you feel this time is over, you have to invent something new. And that's why I'm extremely thankful to being here now and have the chance to do theater and to think, so what do we really need? What means gathering? What means an assembly? What means presence? What is it actually? What is this act of together decide that this is reality and not that, but this now? What is it?
Yeah. Yeah, this is an important question to ask. So you are sure this is a real rapture we are living through now? This is a real disruption.
You know, I think you can live the biggest disruptions and you see it in human history and you can just avoid to see it. And this is extremely dangerous. I think if we don't see it now, if we don't, and that's why I'm kind of coming back again and again to what you could call the tragic knowledge, that you understand that the time we are living in is not only dramatic, it's tragic. George Steiner, a very beautiful philologist, who was teaching in Switzerland, by the way, in Geneva too, he was writing a book called The Death of Tragedy. And he was saying that, for example, when you compare Ibsen with Sophocles in the play of Ibsen, it's just drama because you give a bit of more women rights, a bit more of whatever, and everything will be fine. Yeah? The society in itself is okay. You just give a bit more rights and a bit more identity politics and everybody will be happy, every minority. But now we feel this time of neoliberal not changing everything, but just find a compromise for everybody is over. Tragic times are here. And we have to watch like this on our time because we don't do it. Of course, we can go on for 20 years more, for 30 years perhaps, but then it really will be too late. And then we don't have any choice anymore. And the objective powers will be too strong. So now we have still a certain space to navigate. And I think we should really use it. We should use our knowledge, if it's a journalistic knowledge or a scientist knowledge or a knowledge as an artist. It's a call, and we should hear it. We shouldn't avoid it.
Yeah, we are coming close to the end. So I think to say this is a very serious statement that this is a tragic time we live in, the crisis. We should actually experience it, and the ideas, the remedy also, you know, crisis and healing. That, but it is serious, and we not to pretend it's a squeak story that happened 2,000 years ago. No, our life in a way depends on on how we see and how interpret stories and how we react to it. And it's about our lives actually, and not about the lives of these people on the stage or the actors are representing it. This is really about us. And as a closing question, there are lots of theater makers, young ones, who decide, should I go in or out? Like, you could be the young Milo Rau listening to Milo Rau now. What would you say to a young artist when you said, I was still sitting at home and studying and reading, and should I go into theater? Should I do art? What kind of art? What kind of advice would you give? I mean, Thomas Ostermeyer said, prepare, you know, this will be over, nothing lasts forever, the fight is coming afterwards. What would you say? What should people really do? Maybe our audience as theater goers, but also as theater artists. What is demanded of them or us at the moment?
I mean, what I'm always saying to the young Milo Raus is connect and do one thing and do it the most simple you can. So, I mean, making art is taking decisions. And you never know. And this is perhaps another step of the tragic knowledge that, of course, you don't know how it will become. You just try, you fail, you try again, and you try and you try and you go on. And then you should connect with the most interesting and most, I don't know, for you, most interesting people that you can react faster than you could when you are alone. So for me, the act of solidarity, the act of togetherness is the most important in theater. You can't sit at home and prepare and read. This is important and it's beautiful, as I said, but after 3-4 weeks, I mean, for a theater maker, that's not writing, you know. It's not how you can work. You can only work collectively. And I think this is extremely important, that even if you become older and you have more power, of course, and you are more alone and you can more decide and you less depend from what the other think, the more stupid actually you become, the more disconnected you become what you should do and what you have to do. You know, I was reading in the last days, I was reading Oedipus, Tyrannos, so the King Oedipus, by Sophocles. And the interesting thing is he's surrounded by experts, and everybody from the beginning of the play on says, you killed your mother, you killed your father, you fucked your mother, you killed your... The reason of the virus, I mean, it's the most interesting play about Corona, by the way, but it's not adapted at all. That's you. You are the problem. Your power, which seems so rational, is perverse. And I think to understand this, that we actually know everything, we only have to act, we only have to take decisions. This is what I would propose. And I have always to propose to myself too. I think that, okay, let's plan the season, let's write the play, let's do this, let's plan. It's impossible. I mean, this is really tragic knowledge. It's impossible to have any plan.
And in some way, the interesting thing of the underlying curse that Laios, Oedipus's father, was cursed because he abused, molested a young kid, a child, which was in his care, and he was cursed, your son will kill you and sleep with your wife, which Oedipus also didn't know about, the underlying curses, the invisible ones, which we are also dealing with. And these are formations and currents.
You know,
we have to do it, yeah.
I think it makes us humble to understand that we are Oedipus and we are living in a cursed civilization. And that we from the West, we did so many mistakes that it's fine, we are cursed. And perhaps we should now learn from the others. We should somehow shut up and try to learn, and to learn fast. Yeah,
this is a great advice, Milo. And thank you for taking the time. Thank you for taking this so serious. And I hope also that your golden book publications go great. I guess what to do with the theater is you're going to publish it yourself also?
The White Theater book, you mean?
Yeah, is it part of your golden book, which is remarkable? You're a filmmaker, theater maker, a publicist, journalist, you write, political activist, really a model. Hans-Thies Lehmann said a house is like the theater. It has many rooms, and there are all the rooms for someone who does traditional commedia, to this or that, you know, but also you occupy a special place, maybe unlocked with a key, you know, a room that we all didn't know it was there, like Rimini and so many others, and they're part of that permanent revolution. And some say, you know, it takes 100 to 150 years from revolutions, going from the most conservative then, you know, and heading to ultimately liberal things, but it takes a while. It takes years, and it's nothing is fast. And but we have to be on the right side and of history and of justice and social progress. and you certainly are. And so thank you for sharing your time tomorrow. As you said, we have the Richard Schachner, the great thinker and philosopher of theater. I can't wait.
I'm a big fan.
To hear what he has to say, because he's also someone who really comments on our society, and he is always right. On Tage we'll have Arthur Noziciel, who is coming from France, and Guillermo Calderon will be with us, and then also Basil Jones, a great theater artist from South Africa, and who works with puppets and did great work. He did the Wojciech and the Truth Commission and other things. So it is really enlightening for us, and it's a privilege to hear and listen. And thank you really again for sharing. And
it's a privilege to be here, and I will follow tomorrow as a spectator.
Thank you, Milo, and thank you all for listening. I know so much content is out there. We at the Segal always say we need great theater and performance, but we also need a great audience, an audience who does something. So the audience is as significant and as important. And this is one of the changes Milo is fighting for. It's about you who listen. So thank you, and tune in again. And thanks for HowlRound at Emerson College, Vijay and Thea for hosting us, and the Segal team, Sun Yang, May, and Jackie, and talk to you soon. And hopefully one day we'll meet, and it works out that you come to the Segal. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Thanks.
Ciao.